Hey guys, so I thought I'd take this chance to talk to you about managing fatigue and knowing when you're overtraining or not overtraining. And I got a lot of questions about this last week during my 25 hours of training. So I thought I would go through kind of the tools that I use to track some of this. So first off, so I spent about 24 and a half, almost 25 hours on the bike and close to 2 hours actually doing weightlifting. I didn't film the last 2 days of the week. One of the days was just a 5 hour ride, and then the next day was supposed to be a strength day, but I actually felt really tired that day and decided to skip it. Thought I'd do it yesterday. Today's Tuesday, yesterday morning, and I got caught up in some work stuff. So we're going to get that in this morning before this ride. But basically, I have it set up in intervals that if you log in the morning, it'll actually ask you for your wellness data right away, and I'll show you how to set that up a little bit later. But if you click on the day and you go to your wellness data, this is where you can start tracking how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. So I weighed myself this morning. I was 67 kilo on the dot. A little bit heavier than what I will be later in the season, but that's okay. We're doing strength training right now, so maybe some added muscle mass, hopefully. And then my watch actually tracks my sleep time and my resting heart rate, so those will be inputted later after I sync my watch. And then let's come down here to the different categories we have here. So I'm going to go through these different categories, but off to maybe the side, I'll kind of leave a different rolling list of symptoms that I use in my head to kind of judge these categories by. Okay, so sleep quality. This is not just the length of sleep, but actually like how well you actually felt like you slept. Did you wake up all the time? Did you have bad dreams? Were you hot, cold? I slept great last night, so I'm going to give that a great. And then, that doesn't apply to me. Soreness. So this is pre-training, but I typically judge the soreness after I do some morning stretching. Because I find I tighten up at night. And if I sat in the morning during having breakfast, I tighten up even more. So getting the legs and the body loose a little bit is pretty good. So soreness, I'd say I just at average right now. Average soreness, not too bad. Fatigue. Now this is kind of the big one here of what actually counts as being fatigued, and this is where that rolling list I'll run through here. But there's different categories of fatigue. You're going to have like physical, performance, psychological, physiological, immunological, and biomechanical are kind of like some big categories to judge that off of. And you can take a look at that list and see if you're falling under any of those types of categories. For me, fatigue right now, I'm actually, I'd say, a little bit high still, which I'll show you in a second, but that kind of makes sense for me. Stress, this is really something I think that's overlooked a lot. People don't take into account their life stress when they think about their training. And that's a mistake, because life stress actually is adding like to TSS, your training stress score. It actually adds to that. And some people make an argument that you should actually like count that into your training load, that is actual training stress. I don't think you necessarily need to do that, but you do need to have a way of tracking your stress. So right now, I'd just say my stress is somewhere between average and high. Today, I'd say it's average. Yesterday, I felt maybe is a little bit higher than what I recorded. Just some work stuff, and then your mood. And this is again going to be very subjective. So I'd say I'm in a pretty good mood. Motivation to train. I'm at an extreme motivation right now, and injury. I don't have any injuries. The second one, a niggle, would be like if your knee's bugging you a little bit, or you've got a little knot in your back, or something like that. I'm doing pretty good. And then hydration level, very, very important when we're training so much to be drinking a lot of water, not just during training, but after training. All right, and then you can also leave some additional comments. So that's going to look like this on the screen here. So it's going to give you kind of these color-coded and your quality of your sleep and hydration. And then you can actually start taking a look back and notice trends. And what's important about noticing these trends is you can start to actually tell if you're overtraining or not. And I'd say there's maybe a couple different categories of overtraining or overreaching. One of which is when you're noticing this pattern and you're perceiving that you have high fatigue. If you take a day off or 2 days off from really heavy training, does your performance then bounce back? And there's been no changes in your performance lately. You're just noticing some fatigue. Do you then get back on the bike and you're performing well again? In that case, you don't really need to worry about the overreaching and overtraining. That was only a moderate overreach, and you're back on track. If you start noticing that you're fatigued and you're decreasing in your power output or in your performance on the bike, and you take some time off and then you bounce back, okay, great. You probably were a little bit higher than the moderate fatigue before and moderate overreach, but no problem. All right. Where we start getting into areas of problem is when we have very high perceived fatigue and it's affecting your performance, and the performance decline is really, really obvious. Maybe you're like, man, I was hitting these intervals like 2 weeks ago, and now I should be doing even better and more because of all the training I'm doing, but it's actually a lot lower and I feel like junk on the bike. You need to take some days off and see if your performance bounces back from there. All right. And then the worst level of fatigue is the fatigue is extremely high and you've had performance decline, and when you take time off and you come back, your performance doesn't go back up again. In that case, you really need to take a week or two off the bike. And if that meant that you have an event that was coming up, you should probably skip that event because you're going to perform extremely poorly. All right, so those are kind of those categories of fatigue. So let's take a look at how to actually turn this setting on so that when you go in and log in the morning, that this screen pops up right away. So if we come over to settings on Intervals.icu and you scroll down, there will be this section here for wellness, and the wellness data, you can set it to prompt or to do not ask. And I have it set to prompt both for that, also for each activity, relative perceived exertion and feel, so that after every activity, when I go in to check the data, it asks me, hey, how did you feel on the bike today? Rate this, so that all of my activities on the bike, you see here, I have an RP of 3, felt really good. RP of 2, it's the exact same ride, but I felt even easier, and I felt really strong by the end of the week. So it tells me, even though I was feeling some fatigue, it wasn't really functional fatigue. It wasn't affecting my performance at all. And that's kind of how I was judging whether or not these 25-hour weeks were too much and I can't recover, or too little. Lastly, one good way of tracking this is kind of going over here to fitness and just being aware of where you're sitting on the form. So if you're in the negative and you're in the red a lot, there's a high chance that you're going to end up with high fatigue. I've been in the red for most of this season. I planned it that way. If you have a good training history, you can go really deep into the red at the beginning of a season in order to build back your fitness. By like another couple weeks, should hardly be touching the red again. So that should be perfectly fine. But this was really important to track all of how I was feeling in the fatigue during this time of year, as I knew I was going to be in a very fatigued state. So I hope that answers your guys' questions surrounding how I track fatigue. We're going to have to do a whole another video on how to actually manage fatigue, and there's a lot of different methods that we can talk about surrounding that. But yeah, until next time, I'll catch you guys on the next ride.